She woke up every day at 5 in the morning to take care of the children of an arrogant billionaire who treated her like invisible furniture, cleaning messes and preparing meals while he built financial empires without ever acknowledging her existence with more than a distracted nod or an abrupt order. Sofia Mendes was 24 years old and had no known family. Raised in overcrowded orphanages where she learned early on that she was not special and that she would need to work 3 times harder than anyone else just to survive in a world that had no place prepared for her. But everything changes drastically when she accidentally finds an old box of documents in the mansion's attic while looking for Christmas decorations, yellowed papers, and official certificates that reveal an impossible secret that has been hidden for 2 decades. Sofia is not just the hired nanny. She is the biological daughter of the very billionaire who employs her, the result of a secret relationship he denied and buried when he chose to marry an heiress from a powerful family instead of taking responsibility for the young employee he impregnated who later mysteriously disappeared. Now armed with DNA evidence and falsified birth certificates that prove a conspiracy to hide her true identity, Sofia must decide whether to confront the man who is biologically her father but morally a cruel stranger, whether to claim the multi-million-dollar inheritance that is legally hers but that will destroy the family that, although dysfunctional, has innocent children whom she loves. And more importantly, whether she can forgive decades of abandonment or if she will use the truth as a weapon to destroy an empire built on lies and denied blood. This is a story of how an invisible nanny became an undeniable heiress, how buried secrets always emerge eventually no matter how deep you bury them, and how identity and belonging are more complicated than blood ties or bank accounts, and you need to stay until the end to discover if Sofia will choose revenge or mercy, fortune or peace of mind, and if it is possible to build a real family from a foundation of betrayal and denial that lasted an entire life. The story begins on a cold Monday morning when Sofia Mendes wakes up at exactly 5 o'clock, as she does every day, and has for 3 years since being hired as a live-in nanny at the Almeida family mansion. She opens her eyes in the small maid's room on the 3rd floor of the enormous property that has 23 rooms but apparently no adequate space for people who work there to live with dignity. Her room is cramped with a sloped ceiling where she hits her head regularly, a single bed that creaks every time she moves, a tiny closet where her few clothes get wrinkled because there is no space to hang them properly, and a small window that offers a view of the back of the property, where the industrial trash bins and the garage with 12 imported cars, each costing individually more than Sofia will earn in her entire working life, are located. Sofia quickly gets dressed in the uniform that is technically optional, but which Catarina Almeida, the billionaire Eduardo Almeida's wife, strongly suggested she wear to maintain appropriate professionalism. It's a conservative gray and white set that looks like it came out of a period movie about Victorian maids. And every time Sofia puts it on, she feels as if she is putting on a costume that announces to everyone that she does not belong to the world of luxury that surrounds her but is only temporarily visiting in the capacity of a servant. She silently descends the back stairs that are reserved for staff so as not to disturb the family with the presence of people who serve them, and enters the huge kitchen that is the territory of the head cook, Dona Mercedes, a 62-year-old woman who has worked for the Almeida family for 35 years, and who treats Sofia with a mixture of maternal affection and pity for someone so young, already trapped in this type of life of servitude disguised as legitimate employment. Sofia prepares the special coffee that Mr. Almeida insists must be made at exactly 5:45 every morning without exception, using specific imported beans that cost 800 reis per kilo. She organizes a silver tray with a fine porcelain cup and small artisanal biscuits, and the financial newspaper folded precisely how he likes it, and takes everything to his office on the 1st floor, where he is invariably already working, because men who build billionaire empires apparently never sleep or have basic human needs like adequate rest. Eduardo Almeida barely looks up when Sofia quietly enters and places the tray on the side table exactly where he expects to find it. He murmurs something that might be "thank you," or might just be a random sound of acknowledgement you would make to an obedient dog, and Sofia leaves without saying anything because she learned in the first few months that Eduardo does not like morning conversation and considers attempts at basic pleasantries like "good morning" or "how did you sleep" as irritating interruptions to his focus on numbers and business that are infinitely more important than basic human courtesy. Sofia then goes up to the second floor where the children's rooms are located. Isabella, 6 years old, and Miguel, 4, Eduardo's children with Caterina, who is the heiress of her own textile empire. So the marriage was essentially a corporate merger that produced two beautiful but visibly neglected children by parents who are too busy building wealth to truly raise the children they already have. Isabella and Miguel are the main reason Sofia remains in this job despite a salary that is technically fair but emotionally inadequate for the amount of work and lack of respect she receives. She genuinely loves these children who see her more as a mother than Caterina, who spends perhaps 2 hours a day with her own children between social engagements and board meetings and spa treatments that are apparently essential to maintain the appearance of a 42-year-old woman who could pass for 35. Sofia gently wakes the children, helps Isabella choose an outfit for school, while patiently negotiating why she cannot wear a princess dress for gym class, convinces Miguel that yes, he needs to wear pants today, even if he doesn't like the feeling of the seam, supervises toothbrushing and hair combing and sunscreen application, because despite all the wealth, these children's basic parenting falls to a 24-year-old nanny who earns 4,000 Rs per month working, essentially 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Breakfast is an elaborate production in the formal dining room because Caterina insists that even small children need to learn proper etiquette early on. Sofia seats the children in chairs that are too antique and too formal for restless small bodies, serves organic imported oatmeal and decorative cut fruit and freshly squeezed juice, and stands a few feet away ready to intervene when Miguel inevitably spills something or Isabella decides she doesn't like the texture of the food today. Eduardo eventually enters, already dressed in a suit that costs more than 3 months of Sofia's salary. He kisses the tops of the children's heads distractedly while checking his phone, murmurs something about an important meeting and a trip to São Paulo, and leaves without really having interacted significantly with his own children beyond a 90-second physical presence that technically counts as parental participation. Caterina appears 30 minutes later, impeccable in designer clothing and makeup, professionally applied by a team that comes to the mansion every morning at 6:30. She comments critically that Isabella has messy hair, as if Sofia hadn't spent 15 minutes combing the girl's unruly curls, suggests that Miguel needs more discipline because he is shaking his legs under the table inappropriately, and then announces that she has a charity lunch, followed by a committee meeting, so she won't be home until 7 in the evening, implying that Sofia will obviously cover all the children's needs, as she always does. After both parents leave in their separate cars driven by separate chauffeurs for separate lives that rarely intersect except at social events where they need to perform as a united couple, Sofia finally relaxes a little because now it's just her and the children without the tension of pleasing employers who see her as a servant instead of a person. She drives Isabella to the exclusive private school where tuition is 45,000 Rs, and teachers treat Sofia with thinly veiled scorn because they assume she is a poor single mother who somehow managed to enroll her daughter in a school above her class until they realize she is just the nanny. Then the treatment changes to polite indifference. Sofia spends the mornings with Miguel doing educational activities that she herself researches and plans because neither parent has ever asked or cared about their son's early educational development. She teaches colors and numbers through games, reads books with different character voices that make Miguel laugh uncontrollably, builds forts with cushions and pretends they are astronauts exploring distant planets. And in these moments, she almost forgets that this is not her real life, but work she performs in someone else's life. The afternoons are a rush of picking Isabella up from school. supervising homework that is absurdly advanced for a 6-year-old, but the prestigious school has a reputation to maintain, taking them to ballet and piano and French lessons because rich children need to be proficient in multiple arts and languages before they turn 7, preparing healthy and balanced dinners that usually end up being negotiated down to something simpler because children exhausted from overscheduled days don't want to eat quinoa and grilled vegetables. The nights are a routine of baths and bedtime stories and infinite checks for monsters in closets or under beds, and when both children are finally asleep, usually around 9 in the evening, Sofia has exactly 1 hour to herself before needing to be available if any child wakes up with a nightmare or needs water or simply wants a comforting hug that the parents should provide, but that always falls to her. Sofia uses this precious hour variously. Some nights she studies online trying to complete the degree in pedagogy. She started before money ran out and she had to drop out to work full-time. Other nights, she just sits in her tiny room and watches series on an old laptop, trying to mentally escape a life that is simultaneously privileged because she lives in a mansion and deprived because it is not truly her life, but a life she facilitates for other people. There is a peculiar loneliness in living in a house full of people, but not truly belonging to any of them. Sofia is not a family member, but she is also not exactly staff because she cares for the children with a genuine love that goes beyond contractual obligation. She exists in a strange limbo where she is essential but invisible, loved by the children but tolerated by the parents, necessary but not valued in ways that matter beyond monthly deposits in a bank account that never seems to grow no matter how much she saves. What Sofia doesn't know as she executes this exhausting and repetitive routine is that there is a truth buried deep in the foundations of this mansion, a secret that if revealed would completely destroy the ordered and hierarchical life she knows, and potentially elevate her from servant to heiress, from invisible to undeniable, from temporary outsider to a legitimate member of the family that currently employs her without having any idea who she really is or should have been, if not for selfish decisions made 24 years ago, by a man who chose convenience over responsibility and wealth over recognizing his own daughter. Before we discover the impossible secret that will change everything for Sofia and the Almeida family in ways no one can predict, we want to hear from you who are following us now. Tell us in the comments where you are watching us from, which city or country, because we love knowing that our stories reach people everywhere. And if you have ever worked in positions where you felt invisible or undervalued, where you gave more than you received, share those experiences in the comments because creating a community of people who understand these struggles is important. If you are feeling something for Sofia and her impossible situation, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel, activating notifications so you don't miss any part of this story of hidden identity, family secrets, and justice finally served. And at the end of it all, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 to tell us if it touched your heart. Now let's continue because what Sofia is about to discover will turn her world completely upside down in ways she is not remotely prepared to process. The revelation that will change everything happens on a December afternoon when Sofia is looking for Christmas decorations in the mansion's dusty attic, a task that Katerina delegated to her with specific instructions to find vintage family ornaments that need to be displayed on the 12-foot tree that will be set up in the main hall for the annual Christmas party the Almeidas host for 150 important guests. The attic is a forgotten place full of decades of accumulation, boxes stacked to the low ceiling containing everything from preserved baby clothes to old business documents to broken furniture that is too expensive to discard but not useful enough to keep in visible parts of the house. Sofia is rummaging through a third large box when she finds a smaller metal container that looks significantly older than the others. There is rust on the corners, and the latch is broken so it opens easily when she pulls. And inside, there is a pile of yellowed papers and faded photographs, and a thick envelope sealed with wax that broke over time. Curiosity overcomes the professionalism that would normally prevent Sofia from examining the family's personal documents. She sits on the dusty floor with the box in her lap and starts looking through the contents. The first things she sees are photographs of Eduardo when he was much younger, maybe 25 or 26, and in the photos he is clearly in love, embracing a beautiful young woman Sofia doesn't recognize. It's not Katerina, whom she knows from dozens of official photos around the mansion. This woman is different, simpler, with a more genuine smile, more modest clothes suggesting humble origins. Sofia examines the photos more carefully, and there is something strangely familiar about the woman that she can't initially identify, something in the shape of the eyes or the angle of the jaw or the way the hair falls over the shoulders. And then with growing shock, Sofia realizes she is looking at an older version of her own face. The resemblance is not exact, but it is too close to be a coincidence, as if she were looking at an alternate version of herself from another era. With slightly trembling hands, Sofia picks up the sealed envelope and carefully tears the old seal. Inside are official documents. The first is a birth certificate. As she reads it, her stomach violently drops because it says, Name, Sofia Mendes Almeida. Date of birth, March 15, 1999. Mother, Laura Mendes. Father, Eduardo Roberto Almeida. And suddenly, Sofia's world stops making sense because this is not possible. It cannot be possible. It has to be a mistake or a coincidence, or maybe another Sofia completely different. But then she finds a second document. This is a paternity test result, dated April 1999, when she would have been just 1 month old. The result confirms with 99.99% certainty that Eduardo Almeida is the biological father of Sofia Mendes, and attached is a handwritten letter in desperate feminine handwriting. The writing is blurred in some places, as if tears had fallen on the paper while it was being written. Sofia reads the letter with her heart pounding so hard she can hear it echoing in the silent space of the attic. It is from Laura Mendes, written to Eduardo 2 months after Sofia was born. Eduardo, I don't know what to do anymore. You don't answer my calls. You don't reply to my letters. Your security guards prevent me from entering the office. I'm desperate and scared and alone with a baby who is our daughter, whether you acknowledge it or not. You said you loved me, said you would take care of us. But then your family announced your engagement to Katerina Silveira, and suddenly I don't exist to you anymore. I am sending you again the paternity test that proves Sofia is yours. I am sending photos of her that have your eyes, your curls, your smile when she rarely smiles. She is part of you, Eduardo, and you cannot just pretend we are not real because it is inconvenient for your career plans and strategic marriage. All I ask is that you legally acknowledge her, that you give her the name and rights she deserves as your daughter. I don't need your love anymore, because I understand that was a lie from the start. But she deserves more than the life I can give her alone on a waitress salary. Please, Eduardo, do the right thing, at least this once. The letter ends abruptly, and there is a second letter dated 6 months later. This one is from Eduardo's lawyer. The language is cold and legal, offering a single sum of 300,000 reais for Laura to sign documents renouncing any future rights or claims against Eduardo or the Almeida family, voluntarily giving up custody and agreeing never to contact Eduardo or reveal paternity under penalty of devastating legal proceedings. And attached is a consent form for adoption signed with Laura's name, but the signature looks strange and shaky, as if it had been forced. Sofia feels physical nausea rising. She runs to an old trash can in the corner of the attic and vomits violently, years of reality that she knew crumbling into fragments that no longer fit into a coherent pattern. She is not a random orphan who was unlucky enough to be born without a family. She has a family, she has a father. And that father is the man who employs her to take care of his legitimate children without ever revealing that she is also his daughter. He chose to preserve his reputation and an advantageous marriage over responsibility for his daughter, allowed her to grow up in neglected orphanages while his own legitimate children grew up in a mansion with everything money can buy. With still trembling hands, Sofia grabs her phone and searches for Laura Mendes along with the birth year from the certificate. What she finds completely breaks her already cracking heart. There is a small newspaper article from August 1999. Young mother dies in tragic accident. Laura Mendes, only 23 years old, was found dead in her apartment under circumstances that authorities initially investigated as suspicious, but eventually filed as a domestic accident. She leaves behind a 5-month-old daughter who will be sent to the adoption system. Neighbors report that Laura appeared depressed in the weeks leading up to her death and was visibly thin and stressed. Police found no evidence of a crime, but Laura's family insists she would never have been careless in a way that would lead to a fatal accident. Sofia connects the horrible pieces. Her mother Laura was being pressured by Eduardo's lawyers to relinquish her rights, was likely out of money because she spent everything on lawyers trying to force paternity acknowledgement, was depressed and alone and desperate, and then died in circumstances that seemed too convenient for a rich man who had a problem that needed to disappear. Sofia has no proof that Laura's death was anything more than a tragic accident, but the timing and circumstances raise disturbing questions that she is not equipped to investigate, but also cannot stop considering. She remains sitting in that dusty attic for an indeterminate time, processing the revelation that her entire life was a lie built on a crime of denial, that she spent 3 years caring for half-siblings without knowing they were half-siblings, that the man she calls Mr. Almeida and treats with deferential respect is biologically the father who deliberately abandoned her, who chose to preserve his reputation and an advantageous marriage over responsibility for his daughter, who allowed her to grow up in neglected orphanages, while his own legitimate children grew up in a mansion with everything money can buy. The anger that begins to grow in Sofia is different from anything she has felt before. It is not hot, explosive anger, but cold and calculated, a toxic mix of betrayal and injustice and lost years. She looks around the attic, which is full of discarded wealth, and realizes that the family living below discards people in the same way they discard furniture that no longer serves a decorative purpose. She was supposed to be discarded too. An inconvenient baby from an inconvenient relationship with a woman of the wrong class. But by some cruel twist of fate, she ended up returning not as the recognized heiress, but as a paid servant to facilitate the comfortable life of people who should legally have shared an inheritance with her. Sofia eventually descends from the attic with the metal box hidden under her sweater. She did not find the Christmas decorations she was supposed to be looking for, but found something infinitely more valuable and infinitely heavier. She hides the box in the back of the closet in her tiny room and spends the rest of the day in an automatic daze, executing childcare tasks without really being present, her mind spinning through possibilities and decisions and consequences. When Eduardo returns that evening, Sofia observes him differently, trying to see beyond the distant employer to the man who is biologically her father, looking for physical similarities that she always attributed to coincidence, but which now seem obviously genetic. They have the same unusual greenish-brown eye color, the same curls that he controls with expensive products while she leaves wild because she can't afford adequate salon care, the same expression when concentrated that Isabella often comments on, making Sofia laugh, and now every similarity seems like a glaring accusation instead of a casual observation. Sofia wants to confront him immediately, wants to throw the documents in his face and scream years of injustice and abandonment, but something holds her back. Perhaps self-preservation because she has no backup or resources if he fires her immediately and denies everything. Perhaps fear of what the discovery will mean for Isabella and Miguel, who are technically her half-siblings and whom she genuinely loves and doesn't want to hurt, even if justice for herself may require destroying their stability. Perhaps just shock that hasn't completely processed yet, transforming into strategy. So Sofia waits. She continues executing her work perfectly, while secretly copying all the documents in the box using a local library scanner during her only monthly day off. She researches inheritance laws and belated paternity recognition and the statute of limitations on claims. She discreetly consults a lawyer, offering a free consultation without revealing real identities, only asking hypothetical questions about the rights of an unrecognized daughter when the father is documentedly proven through DNA. The lawyer says that her case would be strong, that a daughter has inalienable rights to an inheritance regardless of formal recognition. especially when recognition was denied through coercion or fraud, that the documents she describes would constitute significant evidence, and that the man in question could face severe legal consequences if it was proven he defrauded the system to deny paternity, or if there was any involvement in the sudden death of the mother, even if only through pressure that contributed to her mental. Sofia absorbs this information and feels the weight of the decision before her. She can use the truth as a weapon to destroy Eduardo and claim everything that legally should be partially hers. Can finally have justice and recognition and financial compensation for the lost years in a system that failed to protect her. But revenge will come with costs she doesn't know if she is prepared to pay, including potentially losing the relationship with Isabella and Miguel, who are innocent victims just as much as she is, including completely destroying a life that, although not hers, has become comfortable in small but significant ways, including opening a Pandora's box that may contain more pain than satisfaction when the full truth about her mother's death eventually emerges from the shadows where it was buried for 2 decades. Sofia spends 3 weeks living with a secret that threatens to consume her from the inside out. Every interaction with Eduardo is self-imposed torture, where she has to bite her tongue not to scream the truth that he obviously will never voluntarily reveal. Every moment with Isabella and Miguel is bittersweet because she loves them, but now knows they are technically family who was denied to her through manipulation and deliberate abandonment. During these 3 weeks, Sofia transforms from a passive, compliant nanny into a careful strategist who plans every next move with a precision she has never applied to anything in life before. She meticulously documents every interaction with the Almeida family, recording conversations when it is legal to do so, and writing down details that may be relevant later. She extensively researches Eduardo's fortune, discovering that he is worth approximately 800 million reais, split between properties, investments, stakes in multiple companies, and a net worth that continues to grow even while he sleeps. As a recognized daughter, Sofia would be entitled to a significant percentage of that fortune, regardless of Isabella and Miguel. Brazilian law protects the rights of all biological children equally unless there was a valid legal waiver of rights, which in their case clearly did not happen, considering the documents in the attic show coercion instead of genuine consent from Laura. Sofia also investigates Catarina, discovering that she is not just a passive wife, but a formidable businesswoman in her own right, with a textile empire inherited from her own family and an active stake in Eduardo's corporate decisions. Their marriage is clearly a business partnership as much as it is a romantic one, if any genuine romance remains after 17 years together, raising 2 children while maintaining demanding careers. Sofia's decision to finally confront Eduardo comes after a specific incident that crystallizes exactly how dispensable and unvalued she is considered in this house. It is Friday evening, and Sofia had planned to use her rare free hours to visit a friend from her orphanage days who is temporarily in the city. But at 5 in the afternoon, Catarina casually announces that she and Eduardo have an important dinner with Japanese investors, and Sofia will obviously stay with the children, without asking if Sofia had plans or if she minds canceling them. When Sofia hesitates momentarily before agreeing, Catarina raises an eyebrow and says in a tone that doesn't allow for discussion, "That's what we pay you for, Sofia, to be available when we need you. If this is a problem, perhaps we need to reevaluate the working arrangement and find someone more flexible and committed." And Sofia swallows her anger and humiliation and agrees, as she always does, because she needs this job and roof and salary, even if the treatment is degrading. But after Catarina leaves to get ready and Sofia hears Isabella and Miguel laughing, watching a cartoon in the living room, something in her finally breaks. Not dramatically, but with silent, definitive clarity. She realizes she can continue being invisible and disposable forever, or she can use the truth she discovered to force the recognition she should have had since birth. And while the second path is terrifying and uncertain, the first path is the slow death of dignity and identity that she is no longer willing to accept. Sofia waits until Monday, when Eduardo is in his home office reviewing financial documents. She knocks on the door more firmly than she normally would, and when he distractedly says, "Come in," without looking up, she enters and closes the door behind her with a deliberate click that finally makes him lift his eyes from the papers. Eduardo frowns, seeing Sofia standing there with an expression he has never seen before on her face. It is not the habitual deference of an employee, but a determination that borders on defiance, and he asks with poorly disguised impatience, "Yes, Sofia, what is it?" "I'm in the middle of an important review and have a teleconference in 15 minutes. Sofia answers with a voice she worked to keep steady. "Mr. Almeida, I need to speak with you about an urgent personal matter. It will take more than 15 minutes and I suggest you cancel the teleconference because this cannot wait." The audacity of the statement makes Eduardo actually look at her properly for the first time in weeks, maybe months. He sees something in her eyes that makes him hesitate, some knowledge or determination that wasn't there before, and against his better judgment he responds, "Fine. You have 10 minutes. Start talking." Sofia takes a deep breath, places the large envelope she was carrying on the table between them, and says with a clarity she had practiced hundreds of times in the mirror, "3 weeks ago, I found a box in the attic while looking for Christmas decorations. Inside there were documents about your relationship with a woman named Laura Mendes in the late 90s. There was also the birth certificate of your daughter, born in March 1999, a paternity test confirming that you are the biological father, and correspondence showing that you refused to acknowledge that child and paid her mother to disappear. I would like an explanation as to why I am looking at my own birth certificate with your name listed as the father." The silence that follows is absolute and suffocating. Eduardo is completely paralyzed, his face progressively draining of color as he processes the words Sofia just said. He looks at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake, then at Sofia, then back at the envelope, and Sofia can see the exact moment when recognition hits. When he truly looks at her face and sees what he should have seen 3 years ago when he hired her. A young, feminine version of him, living evidence of a sin he tried to bury 2 decades ago. Eduardo finally speaks, and his voice comes out hoarse and defensive. "Where did you get those documents? You had no right to look through the family's private things." Sofia feels renewed anger because, of course, his first reaction is not horror at abandoning his own daughter, but irritation at being caught. She replies with an icy voice, "The family's private things? I am family. I am your biological daughter. Even if you denied me for 24 years, and I had every right to know the truth about my origin, especially considering I have worked in this house for 3 years without an idea that I am caring for my own half-sibling." Eduardo stands up abruptly from his chair, begins to pace the office like a caged animal, and finally stops by the window, looking out at the impeccable gardens without really seeing them. "Sofia, if it is really you, which seems impossible, but seeing you now I can see the resemblance. You need to understand that it was a complicated situation a long time ago. I was young and foolish and was under enormous pressure from my family to make a strategic marriage that would save the family businesses that were nearly bankrupt. She was sweet and I genuinely liked her, but it wasn't sustainable, and when she got pregnant, I panicked because I knew my family would never accept it." Sofia interrupts, her voice trembling with contained rage. "So instead of being a man and taking responsibility, you paid my mother to abandon me and disappear. And when she tried to fight back and make you acknowledge your rights, she ended up dead under suspicious circumstances only 5 months later, and I spent 24 years in the orphanage and foster care system while you built an empire and a legitimate family, and now I have the perverse irony of being hired to care for the children you chose to acknowledge while denying me." Eduardo turns from the window, his eyes showing something that might be genuine remorse or might just be fear of the consequences. "I had nothing to do with Laura's death. It was a tragic accident that haunts me to this day, even if you don't believe it. And as for you, I tried to find where you went in the system, but a child disappears easily in bureaucracy, and eventually, I know this sounds terrible, but eventually life moved on. And I had my own family and responsibilities and couldn't stay obsessed with a mistake of the past." Sofia feels hot tears threatening to fall, but refuses to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She says with a steady voice, "A mistake of the past? I am a human being, not a mistake. I am your daughter biologically, even if you have treated me as non-existent, and now we have a situation where I can take these documents to a lawyer and force legal acknowledgement and claim a portion of the inheritance that is legally mine, or we can resolve this in a way that minimizes damage to the innocent children involved whom I love despite everything." Eduardo quickly calculates options like the businessman he is. "What exactly do you want? Money? I can transfer a generous amount if you sign a non-disclosure agreement and no fuss. 1 million reais clean, tax-free, if you never mention this to anyone, especially not to Catarina or the children." The offer confirms everything Sofia suspected about his character. For Eduardo, everything is a transaction that can be solved with enough money. He feels no genuine remorse for abandonment, only the inconvenience of being caught, and this strengthens her resolve. Sofia shakes her head. "I don't want your money in exchange for silence. I want legal acknowledgement as your daughter. I want my name legally changed to Sofia Mendes Almeida, as it should have always been. I want official documentation that gives me equal inheritance rights, just as Isabella and Miguel have, and I want the truth about what really happened to my mother because I don't believe it was simply an accident." Eduardo turns pale again. "You can't be serious. Legal acknowledgement will destroy my marriage. Catarina will never accept that I had a secret daughter all this time. And opening an investigation into Laura after 24 years will generate a media scandal that will hurt the businesses and reputation I spent decades building." Sofia shrugs, with an indifference she doesn't feel but performs well. "Those are the consequences of the choices you made 2 decades ago. It is not my problem that the truth is inconvenient now, and I have all the time in the world to process this through the legal system if necessary, while you have a career and reputation that can be destroyed by the revelation of child abandonment and possible involvement in a suspicious death." Eduardo realizes he is cornered in ways that money alone cannot resolve. He tries a different approach. "Sofia, think about the children, Isabella and Miguel. You say you love them. Discovering that the nanny they adore is actually a secret half-sister will confuse them and potentially traumatize them, and you know her, she will remove any perceived threat to her family, and that means you will be fired immediately and probably never see the children again." It is emotional blackmail, but it is effective because Sofia genuinely loves Isabella and Miguel and doesn't want to hurt them. She considers her options and replies, "Then I suggest you find a way to reveal the truth in a manner that minimizes trauma for them, perhaps starting with discreet legal acknowledgement before a personal revelation, perhaps involving a family therapist to help the children process. But one way or another, the truth will emerge because I will not live as a ghost in my own story anymore." Eduardo finally sits down heavily in his chair, looking decades older than he was 15 minutes ago. "I need time to process this and consult my lawyers and figure out how to deal with Catarina. Give me 2 weeks to create a plan that protects everyone involved as much as possible." Sofia considers and agrees. 2 weeks. But if at the end of that period there is no concrete movement toward legal acknowledgement, I will take the documents to a lawyer and let the legal process sort it out. And you can be sure the media will love the story of a billionaire who abandoned his daughter and unknowingly hired her as an employee years later. Eduardo nods in defeat, and Sofia leaves the office feeling a strange mix of triumph and sadness. She forced the confrontation that needed to happen, but now the consequences will begin to unfold in ways she cannot completely control. And while justice is closer than it has ever been, she knows that the coming weeks will change her life and the lives of everyone in this house irreversibly. And there is no guarantee that the change will result in the happy ending that we naively imagine when we think of justice and truth. The 2 weeks following the confrontation are tense in ways that make Sofia question whether forcing the truth was the right decision or a selfish act that will destroy more than it fixes. Eduardo avoids her almost completely. delegating all communications about the children through cold, brief text messages, and when their paths inevitably cross in shared spaces of the house, he looks through her instead of at her, as if making her invisible again could somehow undo the revelation she forced. Katerina notices that something is wrong. She comments to Sofia during breakfast that Eduardo has been strange and distracted lately, and asks if Sofia has noticed anything in the last few days that could explain the change in behavior. And Sofia has to lie, saying she hasn't noticed anything, while knowing exactly that she is the cause of the tension permeating the house. Sofia watches Eduardo having urgent whispered phone conversations that he abruptly ends when someone enters the room. She sees piles of legal documents in his office when she passes. She feels the weight of the decision he needs to make pressing down on everyone like a storm gathering on the horizon. On the 10th night after the confrontation, Sofia is lying awake in her tiny room when she hears a soft knock on the door. She opens it to find Eduardo looking exhausted and aged. He asks if they can talk, and she reluctantly allows him to enter, although it is inappropriate and uncomfortable to have an employer in her room at 11 at night. Eduardo sits in the single, uncomfortable chair, while Sofia remains standing with her arms crossed defensively, and he begins to speak in a tired voice. I spent 2 weeks consulting 3 different lawyers, and they all say the same thing. Your case is legally solid, the paternity test is irrefutable, the documents clearly show that I tried to deny responsibility, and you are entitled to both legal acknowledgement and a portion of the inheritance. I could fight through the legal system for years, but I would eventually lose and in the process completely destroy my reputation when the details become... Sofia waits without commenting, letting him continue. So, I decided that I will grant legal acknowledgement as you request. My lawyers have already prepared the documentation that only needs our signatures. Your name will be legally changed to Sofia Mendes Almeida, and you will be officially recognized as my daughter with all the rights that implies, including future inheritance. Sofia feels a wave of relief mixed with apprehension about what comes next. And Katerina and the children, when will they know the truth? Eduardo rubs his face with his hands, evidencing stress. That is the major complication. I told Katerina yesterday. It was the hardest conversation of my marriage, and that includes several serious fights over 17 years. She is destroyed and furious simultaneously. Sofia feels unexpected compassion for Katerina, who, despite her coldness, always treated Sofia with professional correctness, if not exactly warmth. How exactly did she react? Eduardo sighs heavily. Initially, she didn't believe it. She thought it was some elaborate extortion attempt, but when I showed her the documents and old photos of Laura and explained that not only was it true, but that you worked here for 3 years without any of us noticing the connection, she went silent for a very long time and then said, she needs time to process and decide what it means for her marriage. She has been in the guest room for 2 days and refuses to speak to me except for absolutely necessary logistics regarding the children. Sofia feels guilt starting to weigh on her despite knowing rationally that she is not responsible for Eduardo's actions 2 decades ago. And the children, have they noticed something is wrong? Eduardo nods. Isabella asked why Mommy is sad and why Daddy and Mommy aren't talking. I had to invent a story about a business disagreement, which isn't technically a lie, but both children sense the tension even if they don't understand the story. The conversation is interrupted by a louder knock on the door. Eduardo and Sofia freeze, and then they hear Katerina's voice, cold and controlled. Eduardo, I know you're in there. One of the staff saw you go up. Come out immediately. We need to talk, all 3 of us, if this is really what you claim it to be. Eduardo opens the door, revealing Katerina in a silk robe, with an expression that reveals no emotions, although her eyes are visibly red from crying. She looks at Sofia with a new, uncomfortable intensity, as if she were seeing a completely different person from the nanny she knew. Put on something appropriate and come to the private living room. This conversation cannot happen in the hallway or the maid's room. 10 minutes later, the 3 are sitting in the smaller room used for private family conversations. Caterina in the main armchair, Eduardo on the sofa looking miserable, and Sofia in a side chair feeling like she is on trial. Caterina speaks first with a controlled voice that barely hides rage. Sofia, or should I start calling you something different, now that you are apparently part of this family? My husband told me an extraordinary story about how you are supposedly his daughter from a relationship he never mentioned in 17 years of marriage, about how you discovered this by accident and decided to confront him instead of coming to me first, or at least giving him a chance to reveal the truth on his own terms. Sofia responds carefully. Mrs. Almeida, I understand you are hurt and betrayed by what Eduardo concealed. But I would like to clarify that I did not know who I was until 3 weeks ago, when I found the documents by accident. I spent 24 years not knowing who my father was, and the last 3 years working in this house completely ignorant of the connection. So I did not come here with an agenda or an intention to destroy your marriage. Caterina laughs bitterly. But you are destroying it anyway, aren't you? Intentional or not. And now I need to decide what to do with the information that my husband not only had a child out of wedlock, which technically was before we married so it doesn't count as infidelity, but that he denied and abandoned that child in a way that is morally repugnant, regardless of legality. Eduardo tries to intervene. Caterina, I know I made a terrible mistake a long time ago. I have no excuse. But we were just dating back then and you knew about Laura. I told you when we got serious. Caterina turns to him with an icy stare. Yes, you mentioned an ex-girlfriend named Laura. You did not mention that she got pregnant and that you paid her to disappear and relinquish the child. That small detail was conveniently omitted from your sanitized confession about the past. The tension in the room is palpable, and Sofia considers whether she should let them resolve this privately. But Caterina turns to her again. Sofia, Eduardo showed me the documents, and I am convinced the story is true. You are his daughter biologically, but now we have a complicated situation where you are technically part of this family, but until last week you were an employee, and frankly, I don't know how to navigate this in a way that isn't completely bizarre and uncomfortable for everyone, including especially the children. Sofia agrees. I understand completely. And believe it or not, I considered not revealing the truth and just continuing to live as I was because I knew it would cause this kind of rupture. But I couldn't. I couldn't continue working here, knowing I am a denied daughter taking care of acknowledged children while my biological father treats me as invisible. Caterina studies Sofia for a long moment. I can see why you felt compelled to confront the situation, and honestly, if the roles were reversed, I would probably do the same. But now we need to figure out logistics. Eduardo has already agreed to the legal acknowledgement, which I cannot prevent nor necessarily want to, because you are not to blame for his sins. But you obviously cannot continue working as the nanny. It would be grotesque, considering the revelation. Sofia feels relief because the thought of continuing as an employee knowing the truth was terrifying. I agree completely. I was going to offer my resignation if you wanted, but I also recognize that leaving abruptly would be confusing and painful for Isabella and Miguel, who have become very attached to me. Caterina considers. Then I suggest a transition where we tell the children gradually over the next few months an age-appropriate version of you being part of the family, while you initially remain in a modified capacity, not exactly as a nanny, but as, I don't really know, a family member who helps with the children until we find a suitable permanent arrangement. Eduardo seems relieved that Caterina is being rational despite her obvious anger. That seems reasonable. Thank you for considering the children's, well, above everything else. Caterina looks at him with an expression that could freeze water. Don't misunderstand me, Eduardo. I am doing this for the children, not for you. As for our marriage, that requires a completely separate conversation and probably involving divorce lawyers, because I am not sure I can forgive the level of dishonesty you maintained for years. Not just about Sofia, but about who you fundamentally are as a person. The word divorce weighs heavily in the room, and Sofia feels renewed guilt even knowing she did not cause the marital problems, only exposed cracks that already existed. Katerina stands up, signaling the end of the conversation. I am going to sleep now because tomorrow I need to be a functional mother regardless of how much my world is falling apart. Sofia, you can remain in your room for now, but we will need to find a different living arrangement within a month because, frankly, it is too strange having you live here as you were. Eduardo, you sleep in the office for the foreseeable future, and all of us are going to family therapy because this is a mess beyond any of our capacities to resolve alone. In the following days, the atmosphere in the mansion is icy and uncomfortable. Staff members realize that something has fundamentally changed, although they don't know the details. Isabella and Miguel sense the tension and become more glued to Sofia than usual, seeking stability that the parents cannot currently provide. Sofia feels in a strange limbo. No longer exactly an employee, but also not exactly a family member, eating meals alone because the family dinner situation is too complex to navigate, spending time with the children, but always conscious that every interaction now has the added weight of the eventual revelation that will change their perception of who she is to them. After 2 weeks of consultations with a family therapist specializing in complex dynamics and difficult revelations, it is decided that Isabella and Miguel need to know the truth about Sofia in an age-appropriate manner that minimizes trauma, but respects their intelligence and right to know the real structure of their family. The therapist, Dr. Helena Santos, suggests the revelation happen in a comfortable, familiar setting with both parents present, demonstrating a united front despite marital tensions, and that Sofia be there too so the children can process the information with all relevant people available for questions and reassurance. It is Saturday morning when the family gathers in the informal living room, Isabella and Miguel sitting on the large sofa, looking confused about why there is a formal family meeting when Saturdays are usually for cartoons and pancakes. Sofia is in a side chair with her hands sweating and heart pounding because she is about to fundamentally change her relationship with these 2 children she deeply loves. Eduardo begins with a carefully controlled voice that was rehearsed with the therapist. Isabella, Miguel, Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you about something important about our family. And we want you to know that no matter what we say now, you are loved and safe, and nothing fundamental has changed about how much we care about you. Isabella, 6.5 years old and perceptive beyond her age, frowns. Are you getting divorced? My friend Julia said that when parents start conversations like this, it's always divorce. Katerina quickly reassures her, although technically divorce is a real possibility being discussed in private sessions. We are not announcing a divorce today, darling. We are talking about something different but important, something about Sofia and our family that we didn't tell you before because we didn't know until recently. Miguel, at 4, is more interested in a toy truck he brought, but is listening with partial attention. Eduardo continues. How we sometimes talk about how families come in many different shapes, and that sometimes people are related in ways we don't expect? Well, we found out something surprising about Sofia. She is not just the person who takes care of you. She is actually part of our family in a special way. She is your half-sister. There is silence as Isabella processes, her face cycling through a sequence of confused expressions. Wait, how can Sofia be our sister? She's an adult, and she's our nanny. That doesn't make sense. Katerina takes over the explanation with a gentle voice. I know it sounds confusing, darling. What it means is that before Daddy and I got married, and before you were born, Daddy had a relationship with someone else, a woman named Laura, and they had a baby together. That baby grew up and is Sofia. So she is Daddy's daughter just like you are, which makes her your half-sister because you share the same father. Isabella looks at Sofia with wide eyes. Sofia is our sister? But why did she work as our nanny? Why didn't we know? That is so weird. Sofia leans forward and speaks directly to Isabella with the honesty the therapist encouraged. Isabella, I didn't know I was your sister until very recently. I grew up not knowing who my father was. And when I was hired to take care of you, No one knew about the connection, including myself. It was a big surprise when we found out. Miguel finally fully engages. So now you're going to live with us as a sister and not a nanny? You're going to have a big room on our floor. The question reveals insecurity he carried about the temporary nature of caregivers. Sofia feels tears burning. Miguel, I promise I am not going anywhere. I won't disappear from your lives. Even if I'm not officially working as your nanny anymore, I will always be your sister, and I will always be here for you. Isabella suddenly stands up and runs to Sofia, throwing her arms around her. I'm happy you're our sister. I always wanted an older sister. But I'm sad you didn't tell us sooner. There is a slight accusation in her words that Sofia knows is fair. Sofia hugs Isabella tightly. I didn't know before, darling. I promise you that if I had known, I would have told you sooner. And I'm sorry that the adults made this confusing. You didn't deserve this complication. Miguel joins the hug. And for a moment there is something beautiful and pure in the three siblings embracing, regardless of decades of secrets and lies that separated them. Eduardo watches with an expression of deep remorse, finally understanding perhaps for the first time the real human cost of the decisions he made when he was 26 and thought problems could be solved with money and lawyers. Katerina has tears silently streaming down her face as she watches, and although she is still processing her husband's betrayal, she can recognize that children are resilient and that the love Sofia has for them is genuine, regardless of how they reach this point. In the days following the revelation, Isabella asks millions of questions, trying to understand every aspect of how Sofia grew up and why they weren't all together from the start. Some questions are easy to answer, and others require edited versions of the truth that are appropriate for a 6-year-old. Miguel accepts the change with the ease of a 4-year-old for whom concepts of family are flexible and not fixed. He is mainly excited that Sofia is now officially one of theirs and cannot be fired as the previous nanny was when the parents didn't like something she did. The dynamic in the house changes in subtle but significant ways. Sofia moves out of the tiny maid's room to a proper guest room on the 2nd floor, not as big as the master suites but dignified and comfortable with its own bathroom and a window that overlooks the gardens instead of the trash bins. She is no longer treated as staff, but is also not exactly treated as Eduardo's adult daughter would be. She exists in a liminal space that everyone is navigating without a map because the situation is too unusual to have a clear precedent. The legal acknowledgement is processed through notaries and bureaucratic systems. Sofia officially becomes Sofia Mendes Almeida on all documents. She obtains a corrected birth certificate that lists Eduardo as the father, and lawyers draft inheritance documents that ensure she will receive 1/3 of Eduardo's fortune along with Isabella and Miguel when he eventually passes away. The numbers involved are staggering for Sofia, who never had more than 5,000 reais in her bank account. 1/3 of 800 million is approximately 266 million reais, an amount that would transform anyone's life, but which for Sofia represents something more than money. It represents official recognition that she matters, that her existence is not a mistake to be hidden, but a reality to be accepted and integrated. The news eventually leaks into the Almeida family's social circles, as such things inevitably do. There is delicious scandal among the elite who love any crack in a perfect facade. Rumors proliferate, some close to the truth and others completely fabricated, and Eduardo faces social and business consequences from the revelation, although less severe than Sofia expected because apparently rich men are forgiven for sins that would destroy common people. Katerina faces the social humiliation of a wife who didn't know about her husband's secret child. There are whispers at charity events and pitying glances that she hates more than she would hate direct confrontation, and this adds additional strain to a marriage already weakened by the revelation. But there are also moments of unexpected grace. Katerina's family, especially her mother, who is a formidable matriarch, surprises everyone by receiving Sofia with cautious acceptance, saying that a child is not to blame for the circumstances of their birth and that family must embrace all members, not just the convenient ones. Eduardo faces the toughest judgment from his own family. His still-living father, at 83, expresses deep disappointment that Eduardo lied and denied his granddaughter for decades, and there is a bitter irony in the patriarch who likely pressured Eduardo into the strategic marriage in the first place, now condemning the consequences of that pressure. Sofia navigates all this with a grace that surprises even herself. She refuses to give interviews to the media, which continually tries to turn the story into a sensational headline. She maintains dignity when facing the invasive curiosity of family acquaintances, and most importantly, she maintains focus on developing a real relationship with Isabela and Miguel, which is more precious to her than any inheritance or social recognition. With legal acknowledgement guaranteed and the family situation stabilizing into a new, complicated but functional normal, Sofia decides she cannot leave the question about her mother Laura's death unanswered. The memory of the newspaper article describing suspicious circumstances haunts her, especially at night when she is alone with her thoughts. Sofia discreetly hires a private investigator named Roberto Farias, who specializes in cold cases and has a reputation for being meticulous and discreet. She uses part of the financial settlement Eduardo eventually offered, separate from the formal inheritance, a payment for years of poorly compensated work, and also a tacit acknowledgement that she deserves resources to investigate the truth about Laura's death. Roberto begins work by reviewing police files from 1999, which are largely digitized but not completely. He finds the initial report that documents the discovery of Laura's body in a small apartment in a poor neighborhood. The official cause of death was listed as an accidental fall resulting in fatal cranial trauma. She apparently slipped on the wet bathroom floor and hit her head at an unfortunate angle that caused cerebral hemorrhage. The report notes that there were empty bottles of alcohol in the apartment, suggesting Laura may have been intoxicated, contributing to the accident, and that neighbors reported hearing her crying frequently in the preceding weeks, indicating possible depression, but no one witnessed the actual accident or had information suggesting a non-accidental cause. But Roberto, who has investigated dozens of suspicious deaths, notices details that don't fit perfectly. The report mentions that the apartment door was locked from the inside when the body was discovered 3 days after the estimated time of death, but also mentions that a kitchen window was inexplicably open, even though it was winter, and Laura was unlikely to have deliberately left it that way. There is also a note in the margin, almost illegible, about contusions on Laura's arms that the medical examiner attributed to possible previous falls, but that could potentially indicate a struggle or physical restraint. Most intriguingly, Roberto discovers that the investigation was closed abnormally quickly, with documented pressure from superiors to file the case as an accident and move on to the next because the department was understaffed and overwhelmed. And there is a note suggesting that important people wanted the case quietly resolved. Roberto interviews neighbors who still live in the area 2 decades later. Most barely remember Laura or don't want to get involved in an investigation of an old death. But an elderly woman named Donna Carmen, who lived next door to Laura, has a surprisingly clear memory and a story to tell. Carmen remembers that Laura was visibly stressed and scared in the final weeks of her life, that she mentioned being pressured by powerful people to sign papers she didn't want to sign, that she cried at night holding the baby and talking about how she was going to protect her from people who wanted to take her away. Carmen also remembers something she didn't tell the police at the time because she was scared. 2 days before Laura died, she saw 2 men in expensive suits entering the building and knocking on Laura's door. The men were polite but intimidating when Carmen asked who they were. They said they were lawyers handling private legal matters and that she should mind her own business. Roberto checks the records of the law firm Eduardo used at the time, getting names through the documents Sofia provided. He tracks down 2 lawyers who worked specifically on delicate cases involving silence payments and discreet resolutions of personal problems for wealthy clients. One of the lawyers died years ago, but another is still alive. Retired at a luxury resort on the South Coast, apparently living very well for a simple retired lawyer. Roberto manages to get an interview by pretending to be a writer researching the history of legal practices in the 90s. The lawyer, who reluctantly agrees to speak on condition of anonymity, admits with a remorse unexpected in a 70-year-old man that there are things in his career he is not proud of. When Roberto eventually maneuvers the conversation to paternity issues and silence payments, the lawyer becomes visibly uncomfortable. Roberto finally shows him a photo of Laura that Sofia provided, and the lawyer immediately recognizes her. "Oh God, that woman. Yes, I remember her too well. A case that still haunts me. A young mother who just wanted the rich playboy to take responsibility for his daughter. She wasn't asking for fortunes, just acknowledgement and reasonable child support. But our client, I won't name him even after all these years, was desperate to make the problem disappear before an important marriage." Roberto gently presses, "And you made the problem disappear, how exactly?" The lawyer visibly hesitates between conscience and the instinct for self-preservation. "We did what lawyers do. We pressured her with legal threats. We offered money for her to go away. We said we would fight for custody and that she would lose her daughter anyway, so better to accept payment and start over far away. It was brutal and immoral, but technically legal." Roberto asks carefully, "And when she refused to sign despite the pressure, what happened?" The lawyer turns pale. "I won't say we knew anything specific, but 2 weeks after the last meeting where she threw us out, saying she would never give up her daughter, we received a call that she had died in a domestic accident, and honestly, I always suspected it wasn't exactly an accident, but I never wanted to know too much because the implications were terrifying." Roberto asks directly, "Are you suggesting her death was arranged?" The lawyer quickly shakes his head. "I am not suggesting anything officially, and I will deny this conversation if reported. But I will say that in a legal career that included many dirty cases, that one always felt dirtier than the rest, and that the client involved had connections with people who solved problems in permanent ways when legal methods failed." Roberto cannot absolutely confirm that Laura's death was a homicide, but he collects enough evidence to establish that there was motive, opportunity, and reasonable suspicion, especially considering the documented pressure that Eduardo and his lawyers applied and the convenient timing of her death, eliminating the main obstacle to his marriage with Caterina. When Roberto presents his findings to Sofia in a detailed 60-page report with transcribed interviews and documents, she reads everything with a growing sense of horror and anger. There is a strong possibility that the man who is biologically her father was directly or indirectly responsible for her mother's death. That Laura died not in an unfortunate accident, but because she was in the way of Eduardo's ambitions and refused to disappear quietly. Sofia now faces an even more difficult decision than the original confrontation. She can take these findings to the police and demand the reopening of an investigation that could potentially result in criminal charges against Eduardo, even 24 years later, or she can keep the information, knowing that justice for Laura may mean completely destroying a family that includes Isabella and Miguel, who are innocent and have already suffered enough trauma from recent revelations. Sofia spends weeks processing the information without telling anyone about the investigation she commissioned. She visits Laura's grave for the first time, a small, simple headstone in a public cemetery that Sofia paid to have better marked using part of the settlement with Eduardo. She stands there talking to the mother she never knew, asking what Laura wants her to do with the impossible truth she discovered. There are no obvious or certain answers. Sofia knows that exposing Eduardo as a potential criminal would destroy not only him, but the entire structure of life that Isabella and Miguel know. They would lose a father to prison, or at the very least to a scandal so severe that it would make normal life impossible. But keeping it hidden means letting a man who may have murdered or ordered the murder of her mother live free and prosperous without answering for a horrible crime. Sofia eventually decides to consult the person who surprisingly became an unlikely ally in recent weeks. Caterina, who despite her own reasons to hate Eduardo has shown genuine compassion for Sofia's impossible situation. The two women meet at a neutral cafe away from home where they can speak freely. Sofia tells her everything about the investigation and the findings, maintaining her composure until she can no longer and finally breaking down in tears, describing how her mother probably died because she refused to give up her daughter. Katerina listens with growing horror on her face. When Sofia finishes, there is a long silence before Katerina speaks. Sofia, honestly, I don't know if Eduardo is capable of ordering a murder. Part of me wants to believe he is not, but another part recognizes that I don't truly know the man I married. He hid you perfectly for 17 years, so who knows what else he is capable of hiding. The two women discuss options, considering not only justice, but the practical consequences for everyone involved, and eventually arrive at a plan that is imperfect, but perhaps the only one that balances multiple impossible needs. Sofia will privately confront Eduardo with the findings, giving him a chance to confess the full truth about his involvement in Laura's death. If he confesses direct responsibility, Sofia will take it to the authorities regardless of consequences. But if he convincingly swears he neither ordered nor knew of any violent action against Laura, then Sofia will withhold the information in exchange for significant concessions. The establishment of a foundation in Laura Mendes's name that will support single mothers and orphans with substantial annual financial support from Eduardo, a complete and honest record of Laura and Sofia's story so that Isabella and Miguel know the full truth when they are old enough, and Eduardo's total cooperation in supporting Sofia in life and career in any way she needs without limitation or condition. Katerina agrees with the plan and adds that regardless of what Eduardo confesses or denies, her marriage to him is over because she cannot continue with a man capable of such cruelty. But she will transition the divorce in a way that minimizes impact on the children and will maintain civility for their sake. The final confrontation between Sofia and Eduardo takes place in his office late at night, when the rest of the house is sleeping. Sofia prepared meticulously for this moment, gathering all the evidence from Roberto's investigation in an organized folder. She will record the conversation on a hidden phone with Katerina's consent, who will testify if necessary, and she took steps to ensure that copies of all documents are secure with a trusted lawyer in case anything happens to her. Sofia enters the office without knocking. Eduardo looks up, surprised by the intrusion. Sofia, it's almost midnight. What is going on? Sofia closes the door and locks it, a gesture that makes Eduardo visibly nervous. She places the heavy folder on the table between them. We need to talk about Laura and how she really died, and you are going to tell me the complete truth for the first time in 24 years because I have evidence here that strongly suggests her death was not the accident the police filed, but something much more sinister. Eduardo turns pale instantly, his hand freezing on the computer mouse. What are you talking about? Laura died in a tragic accident. You read the police report, I presume? Sofia opens the folder and begins placing documents methodically on the table. Yes, I read the report. I also read your lawyer's interview from the time who admits you brutally pressured Laura in the weeks before her death. I read the neighbor's statement, who saw two men in suits visit Laura 2 days before she died. I read a private investigator's analysis about inconsistencies in the police report and notes about how the case was closed abnormally quickly with pressure from superiors who received phone calls from important people. Eduardo abruptly gets up from his chair, his voice rising in volume and a defensive tone. You hired a private investigator to meddle in a 24-year-old story. You have no right to do this. These accusations are absurd and defamatory. Sofia maintains a calm and controlled voice. I have every right to investigate my mother's death, especially when the circumstances are suspicious and when the man who had a clear motive and resources to make the problem disappear is sitting in front of me feigning indignation instead of remorse. Eduardo starts pacing the office as he did during their first confrontation months ago. I had nothing to do with Laura's death. It was a horrible accident that has haunted me for years, even if you don't believe it. Sofia interrupts. Then explain why your lawyers visited her 2 days before she died. Explain why the investigation was closed so quickly. Explain the contusions on her arms that were not consistent with a simple fall. Explain the convenient timing that eliminated the only obstacle to your advantageous marriage with Katerina. Eduardo stops pacing and looks directly at Sofia for the first time. He tries to maintain his composure, but breaks. You want to know the complete truth, Sofia? The complete truth is that yes, I pressured Laura through lawyers because I was desperate. And when Laura refused the final offer and kicked out my lawyers, God help me, I became too desperate and did something I deeply regret but swear did not involve physical violence. Sofia leans forward. Explain exactly what you did. Eduardo sits down heavily in the chair. I knew people through the family business, people who resolved delicate problems, and I went looking for one of those men. I won't name him because he's been dead for years anyway, and said I had a problem that needed to disappear. I didn't specify how, just that it needed to be resolved permanently and discreetly. The horror Sofia feels is physical. You are telling me you hired someone to kill my mother? Eduardo raises his hands defensively. No, not exactly. I didn't use those words. I just said I needed Laura to stop being a problem, and the man said he would take care of it, and that I shouldn't ask about the methods, and then 2 weeks later she was dead. And when I discreetly asked what happened, he said it was taken care of to look like an accident, and that I should just keep quiet and be thankful the problem was resolved. Sofia feels violent nausea. So you effectively ordered her death, even if you didn't say the specific words. You knew what you were asking for and what would happen. Eduardo has tears in his eyes now. I was young and foolish and terrified of losing everything. I didn't think of Laura as a real person, just as an obstacle. And when she died, God, Sofia, I didn't sleep properly for years. I had nightmares about her, about you growing up without a mother because of my selfish actions. But I was also relieved because the problem was gone, and I could get married and save the family business, and then I buried the guilt so deeply that I almost convinced myself I wasn't responsible. Sofia is crying now, tears of anger and loss and stolen years. You killed my mother because she loved me too much to abandon me. And then you left me to grow up an orphan without a family while you built an empire and a family of your own. How do you live with yourself knowing that? Eduardo is crying too. I don't live well. I've never lived well. I carry the weight every day. And when you showed up as a nanny, and I looked at you and saw Laura so clearly in your features, part of me wanted to confess immediately, but cowardice won, as it always does. So I kept silent, even knowing it was monstrous to have you working here without knowing who you were or what I had done. Sofia gets up. You are going to do 3 things now, or I will go straight to the police with everything I have, no matter what it does to Isabella and Miguel. First, you are going to write a complete confession of your involvement in Laura's death, including the name of the man you hired to take care of her, even if he's dead. Second, you are going to establish a foundation in her name with an endowment of 50 million reais to support single mothers and orphans in perpetuity. Third, you are going to cooperate fully with any investigation I decide to open, including testimony against any other person involved who is still alive. Eduardo nods. Miserable. I will do what you ask. I deserve prison and worse. But Sofia, I beg you, consider Isabella and Miguel before going public. They don't deserve to have their lives destroyed by my sin. Sofia considers, heartbroken. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with the confession. Part of me wants you to rot in prison for what you did. But part of me recognizes that Isabella and Miguel have already lost enough stability. So I will think and consult people and decide when I'm ready, but in the meantime, you will live knowing that I have the power to destroy you completely at any moment I choose, and that the only reason I don't do it immediately is because I love my siblings too much to put them through more trauma. Eduardo spends the next few hours writing the complete confession, and Sofia records everything and leaves the office at 4 in the morning. In the following days, Sofia struggles with the most impossible decision of her life. She consults lawyers about the legal implications, talks extensively with the therapist about trauma and justice, talks with Caterina, who firmly believes Eduardo must face the consequences, but also recognizes the devastation it would cause for the children. Sofia finally decides on an approach that is imperfect, but perhaps the only morally defensible one. She will keep the confession securely, allowing Eduardo to avoid prison, not because he deserves it, but because Isabella and Miguel deserve a present father, even if imperfect. And he will live under constant threat of exposure, and will spend the rest of his life trying to atone through the foundation and total support for Sofia in everything she needs. Eduardo accepts the terms with the miserable gratitude of a man who knows he is receiving mercy he doesn't deserve. He establishes the Laura Mendes Foundation with an initial endowment of 50 million reais and a commitment to add 10 million annually. The foundation quickly becomes a significant force, supporting thousands of single mothers and orphaned children. Caterina proceeds with the divorce, but in a civilized way, maintaining functional co-parenting. She and Sofia develop mutual respect and even friendship based on shared experiences of being hurt by the same man and choosing healing over destructive revenge. 2 years after the discovery that changed everything, Sofia is in a radically different place from the invisible nanny she was. She completed her undergraduate degree in pedagogy using the resources she now has available, started a master's degree focusing on child trauma and recovery in orphanage systems, and uses her lived experiences to inform academic research that is generating attention in social work circles. Sofia also took on an active role in directing the Laura Mendes Foundation, not just as a figurehead but as the executive director, shaping programs and policies based on a deep understanding of what vulnerable children need because she was one of them. The foundation under her leadership expanded beyond simple financial assistance to include a mentorship program connecting successful adults who grew up in the system with children currently navigating the same challenges, free mental health services specialized in trauma from abandonment and neglect, and political advocacy for structural reforms in social welfare systems that fail so many children. Sofia's relationship with Isabella and Miguel has evolved beautifully over 2 years. They know the full story now, appropriate for their ages, about how Sofia is their sister and why they didn't grow up together. Isabella, at 8, understands more than Miguel at 6, but both accept Sofia as an integral part of the family and a source of stability during the turbulence of their parents' divorce. Sofia no longer lives in the mansion, but has her own modest apartment, which she deliberately chose for its location near the university instead of a wealthy neighborhood. She wants to build an identity separate from the Almeida family's wealth, even though she is legally entitled to part of it. But she visits regularly, and Isabella and Miguel spend frequent weekends with her, doing normal things that rich children rarely experience, like cooking together, visiting public parks, and riding the bus. Eduardo has transformed in ways that are simultaneously impressive and insufficient. He has taken on a much more active role as a father to Isabella and Miguel, making up for years of business-focused neglect. He speaks publicly about the importance of paternal responsibility and has donated millions to related causes beyond the Laura Mendes Foundation, but Sofia knows that no amount of good deeds can undo Laura's death or the years Sofia lost without a mother. They have a civil but not warm relationship. Sofia calls him Eduardo, never father, because the word implies a connection she doesn't feel and he doesn't deserve. He accepts the emotional distance as fair punishment and never pressures her for intimacy she is unwilling to give. Sofia's decision not to criminally expose Eduardo is one she revisits frequently in moments of anger or when she reads about other cases of powerful men escaping justice for horrible crime. There is a part of her that feels she betrayed Laura's memory by letting her murderer live free, even if under constant threat of exposure. But then she thinks of Isabella and Miguel, and the choice becomes clearer. These innocent children have already suffered the loss of a stable family structure. Exposing their father as a murderer, even if he is one, would destroy them in ways Sofia cannot morally justify, no matter how much personal satisfaction revenge would bring. So the confession remains in a secure safe at the lawyer's office, with instructions that if anything happens to Sofia or if Eduardo violates the terms of their agreement in any significant way, the document will be automatically delivered to the police and prosecutor's office. Sofia also embarked on a long process of therapy, working through decades of trauma from abandonment and rejection and the discovery that her biological father was responsible for her mother's death. Some sessions are brutally difficult, where she accesses anger and pain she buried for years. Others are cathartic, where she begins to integrate all the fragmented parts of her identity into a cohesive person who is simultaneously a system survivor, an heiress to a fortune, a foundation director, a loving sister, a reconnected granddaughter, an independent woman forging her own path. For the 2-year anniversary of the discovery that changed everything, Sofia organizes a special event for the Laura Mendes Foundation, a fundraising gala where hundreds of influential and wealthy people attend, partly for the social cause, and partly because Sofia's story is fascinating and everyone wants to meet the nanny who became an heiress. Sofia gives a speech that is honest and powerful about growing up without family, about discovering the impossible truth, about choosing to use her platform and resources to help others instead of being consumed by bitterness, and about how Laura's legacy is not a tragic death, but thousands of lives improved through the foundation that bears her name. Eduardo is present at the event, sitting at a table in the back. He listens to Sofia's speech with tears streaming down his face, not attempting to hide them. He knows he doesn't deserve her forgiveness, but is grateful that she chose to create something beautiful out of a horrible tragedy he caused. After the event, he tries to approach to congratulate her, but Sofia politely avoids private conversation because she is not ready for intimacy, even 2 years later. Katerina, who also attended with a new partner who is a kind, discreet university professor, warmly embraces Sofia and whispers, "Your mother would be proud of who you have become despite everything." Isabella and Miguel are at the event too, dressed formally and clearly bored by the adult parts, but excited when Sofia finally has time for their exclusive attention. Isabella says something that makes Sofia cry with joy. "Sofia, when I grow up, I want to work at the foundation like you and help children who don't have families, because you showed that people can overcome bad things and do good things." Miguel adds with the simple logic of a 6-year-old, "And you are the best sister in the world even if we don't live together all the time." As Sofia observes the ballroom full of people, all there because of her story and Laura's legacy, she reflects on the impossible journey of the last 2 years. From invisible nanny earning 4,000 reais a month to recognized heiress with access to hundreds of millions. From an orphan without an identity to a woman who knows exactly who she is and where she came from, even if the origin includes painful truths about violence and abandonment. The discovery changed everything, but not in the way anyone would have predicted. It is not a simple Cinderella story about a poor girl who discovers she is a princess and lives happily ever after in a castle. It is a much more complex story about imperfect justice, about choosing mercy without forgetting the crime, about building meaning and purpose from the ashes of tragedy, and about how identity is a complex fabric of biology and experience and the choices we make about who we want to be, regardless of who our parents were or what they did. Sofia has no illusions of a perfect ending. She knows she will always carry the scars of growing up without a mother and discovering that her death was not an accident, but a murder arranged by her biological father. She knows that the relationship with Eduardo will always be complicated by the knowledge of what he did and her choice to protect her siblings instead of seeking complete legal justice. She knows there are critics who will say she sold justice for an inheritance and access to privilege. But she also knows something fundamental that years in orphanages and foster care taught her. Survival does not require perfection. It only requires choosing to keep showing up day after day and doing the best you can with the resources and knowledge you have. And by that standard, she is not only surviving, but thriving in ways that honor Laura's memory, creating a world where other vulnerable children have chances that she and her mother never had. As the night ends and guests depart and Sofia finally sits down, removing the uncomfortable shoes she wore for 6 hours, Isabella and Miguel run to her with the inexhaustible energy of children wanting to show things they found at the venue, and in that moment, surrounded by siblings she loves while thinking about her grandparents, and Aunt Mendes she met and the meaningful work she is building through the foundation, Sofia feels something she never expected to feel. Peace. Not peace that comes from forgetting or completely forgiving, but peace that comes from accepting the whole complexity of her story and choosing to build something better from it. And so we come to the end of this extraordinary journey of an invisible nanny who discovered she was an heiress, but more importantly discovered an identity and purpose that go far beyond bank accounts and last name. The story of Sofia and Laura and the Almeida family is about much more than money or status. It's about how we navigate impossible truths, how we balance justice with mercy, how we protect the innocent while holding the guilty accountable as much as possible within the limitations of complex morality, and about how we transform tragedy into purpose that honors those we lose. Now we want to hear from you who stayed with us through this long and emotionally complex story. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much did this narrative resonate with you and touch your heart? Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Share if you have ever experienced discoveries about family that changed your perception of identity. Discuss whether you believe Sofia made the right choice by not criminally exposing Eduardo to protect Isabella and Miguel, or if justice for Laura should have prevailed regardless of consequences for others, and tell your own stories of navigating impossible situations where there were no perfectly right answers, only less bad choices. If this story made you feel something real, if Sofia and Laura and even Eduardo in all his tragic fallibility seemed human and complex, instead of simply good or bad, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the moral nuances of impossible situations where real people need to make difficult decisions with imperfect information and consequences that affect lives beyond their own. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that identity is not defined only by where you were born or who your parents were, but by who you choose to become and what you do with the hand life dealt you, no matter how unfair the initial distribution was. And remember always the central lesson of this story. Truth eventually emerges no matter how deeply buried. Family is more complicated than biology or legality. Justice does not always mean maximum punishment, but sometimes means creating conditions for healing and growth. And most importantly, that some people like Sofia and Laura are discarded and made invisible by systems that value power and privilege. But through courage and determination and a refusal to accept invisibility, they can not only survive, but create legacies that change the lives of thousands of other people who need to know that they too matter, that their stories also deserve to be told, and that no one is truly invisible when they refuse to remain in the background where others try to keep them. Thank you for watching until the end. Until the next story that will make you feel everything.